The United States has dramatically escalated its pressure campaign against Venezuela, deploying an aircraft carrier, labeling a Venezuelan network as a terrorist organization, and launching more deadly strikes at sea. But in the middle of this hardened stance, President Donald Trump has suddenly suggested that Washington might open negotiations with Nicolás Maduro. Why would the U.S. expand its military footprint to levels not seen in decades, while also hinting at diplomacy behind the scenes? Tonight, we break down the motives, the strategies, and the dangers behind this latest U.S.-Venezuela standoff. But to understand why the U.S. made such an aggressive move, we have to look at what happened on Sunday, when the world's most advanced aircraft carrier sailed into the Caribbean. In a major escalation, the U.S. Navy announced that the USS Gerald R. Ford, the largest and most technologically advanced aircraft carrier in American history, has officially arrived in the Caribbean. This was not a routine deployment. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth personally ordered the carrier group into the region last month, and now it's backed by an armada of warships, attack aircraft, and support vessels. With its arrival, the U.S. military presence in the region has surged to 15,000 troops and sailors, the highest concentration in decades. Venezuelan President Nicolás Maduro responded immediately, placing his nation's military on high alert, signaling that Caracas believes the threat of confrontation is very real. What this means: the U.S. now has the practical capability to conduct more maritime strikes, block trafficking routes, and apply military pressure directly on Venezuelan territory. The carrier's presence dramatically shifts the power balance in the region and signals Washington's willingness to escalate far beyond diplomatic sanctions. But military pressure is only one side of the story, because Washington wasn't just moving ships, it was also launching deadly operations at sea. Since September, the Trump administration has launched 21 known strikes on boats and waters off Central and South America, strikes the U.S. claimed were part of an anti-narcotics mission. At least 83 people have been killed in these operations. But here's the controversial twist. The U.S. has not provided any evidence that any of the targeted boats were actually transporting drugs. Many international law experts argue these strikes violate global legal standards, especially because they occur in international or semi-disputed waters. On Saturday, the U.S. military carried out yet another strike in the Eastern Pacific. According to U.S. Southern Command, the targeted vessel was operated by a so-called designated terrorist organization and involved in drug trafficking. But again, no evidence was released to support that claim. The only proof offered was a short video clip showing an explosion at sea. This has fueled criticism that the U.S. is stretching the definition of drug trafficking to justify a military pressure campaign directed at the Venezuelan government itself. But the pressure didn't stop on the water. Washington also delivered a political blow that Caracas could not ignore. The Trump administration added another layer of pressure by officially designating a Venezuelan network known as the Cartel de los Soles as a foreign terrorist organization. Secretary of State Marco Rubio announced the decision, saying the group is led by President Maduro and several high-ranking Venezuelan officials. This designation is not symbolic. It has real consequences. Financial transactions connected to the group become illegal. U.S.-based assets can be frozen. Anyone doing business with the group risks sanctions. A federal indictment dating back to 2020 accuses Maduro himself of drug trafficking in connection with the organization, charges he denies. By labeling the network as terrorist, the U.S. has elevated the situation to a new level. This move also gives Washington broader legal authority to take aggressive actions, including potential covert operations or expanded military strikes. But in the middle of all this pressure, from military deployments to terror designations, Trump said something that surprised nearly everyone. During a press stop in West Palm Beach, Florida, President Trump was asked whether the U.S. was in communication with Maduro. To the shock of many, he replied, "We may be having some discussions with Maduro, and we'll see how that turns out." He added that Venezuela would like to talk, though he did not explain further. When reporters pushed for clarification, Trump shrugged. "What does it mean? You tell me, I don't know. I talk to anybody. I talk to you." These seemingly casual comments contradicted the aggressive military messaging coming from his administration. For years, the U.S. said it would not negotiate with Maduro, whom Washington does not recognize as the legitimate leader after a disputed election. Now suddenly, the possibility of talks was on the table. Why would Trump be signaling diplomacy? There are several possible reasons. One, pressure from Latin American governments urging the U.S. to avoid conflict. Two, internal debates within the Trump administration about how far military pressure should go. Three, strategic messaging designed to keep Maduro uncertain. Four, potential back-channel talks that Washington does not want to publicly confirm. Whatever the reason, Trump's comments suggest that the U.S. strategy may include both hard pressure and a potential diplomatic opening. But why the mixed messages? The answer may lie in the divisions inside Trump's own administration. Despite the clear military buildup, Trump's team has offered conflicting explanations about what exactly the administration aims to achieve. Some aides have publicly emphasized regime change, insisting the ultimate goal is forcing Maduro from office. Others frame the campaign as a counter-narcotics mission, focused on reducing drug trafficking routes in the region. And then there's Trump's own unpredictable comments, suggesting negotiations one day while deploying warships the next. This inconsistency leaves foreign governments, analysts, and even some U.S. lawmakers uncertain about what Washington actually wants. Is the U.S. preparing for limited strikes? Trying to push Maduro into talks? Setting the stage for regime change? Or simply projecting power in the region? Right now, all four interpretations are possible. And that uncertainty becomes even more dangerous when we look at what's happening inside Venezuela. Maduro, already isolated internationally, is treating the situation as a national emergency. By placing his nation's military on high alert, he is signaling that he believes a direct confrontation with the U.S. is possible. This escalation comes at a time when Venezuela faces a deep economic crisis, massive shortages, ongoing political unrest, and fractured international alliances. A miscalculation from either side could trigger a regional crisis. Latin American governments have begun quietly warning Washington about the risks of pushing too far, too fast. Meanwhile, Venezuelan opposition groups are watching carefully. They want international pressure on Maduro, but they do not want a military conflict that could destabilize the entire region. But as all these forces collide, military, political, diplomatic, one question remains: what happens next? The United States is executing its most aggressive strategy towards Venezuela in years. Aircraft carriers deployed, terrorist designations issued, boat strikes intensified, diplomatic signals fluctuating. Maduro is responding with warnings and mobilization. Regional governments are anxious, and the international community is watching closely. This moment represents a crossroads. The U.S. could be laying the groundwork for high-pressure negotiations, preparing for a larger military campaign, or simply projecting strength to weaken Maduro's international standing. But one thing is clear: both countries are entering a volatile phase with unpredictable consequences. If diplomacy is real,
This could be the start of a negotiated breakthrough. If not, the next steps may bring the region closer to a confrontation that no one can fully control. Because in a crisis where military moves and diplomatic whispers unfold at the same time, anything can happen next, and the world will be watching every step.